content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you.
What's good, everybody? I'm GG. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, with no chasers. Before I get things started, as I always do, I want to, take the time to shout out all of the members of the Green Gorilla channel. But also, if you're coming in, please, could you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell notification button. Please, can you do that for me? Thank you. But yeah, as I always do, I want to give a shout out to all of the members of the Green Gorilla channel and all of the people who support me on Patreon. And then I want to get into the show. And I'm going to make it as brief as possible because my man got something to do. You know what I'm saying? My boy got something to do. So, yeah. So anyway, man, shout out to Mr. King, Black Men Being Brutally Honest, Larry R, Seth Sun 7, Michael Ross, Divine Love Ridge, Afro Troop TV, Show Me, Brotherly Love 215, Jay Cleveland Green, and Raiz Mouaji. Big up to y'all, man. Also, big up to Spain Man, Lee Ways, Tahuti of New Comet, Ben Cannon Kenton, Seven Coast Dojo, Apex Prowler, Anthony Davis, I'm Just Jules, and Blacksworth 404. Big up to y'all, man. Big up to An Honest Look, Sherlyn Woe, Ricky Dawson, Stefan, Julius Ferguson, Lord Hamal, True 7360, Mr. Me Too, Call for President, and Superman's Cape. Big up to y'all, man. Big up to Gold Professor, AKs and Curtains, H-Town, Rogish the Buildmonger, BD Main, Adrian Thomas, Electrician 480, Binga, Cutting Up with the Jones and Zanco 1. Big up. Big up to D. Scott, Path Guy, Pete Rock, Aaron Peters, Barnolas, Dardar, Vincent Lindsay, Beautiful Trauma, Quiz the Poet, and Black Wizard ADOS. Big up to y'all, man. Shout out to Jazz Deck, Shadow Observer, Sugar T, Artisan MC, Cal J. Sura, Kareen, Troy Warren, Mrs. KP Bailey, Alan Wiley, and The Face. Big up to y'all. Shout out to Life of Commerce, Dreamlit, A. Wilson's Ghost, Timothy Blewett, Jeffrey Speed, Marvin Battle Jr., and Mark Hope. Big up to y'all. Also, shout out to Adam, BGS Ivmore, Ignatz Mouse, Brian Peaks, Papa Didas, Scott Haywood, Black Uru Strikes, Dr. Tree 33, Leroy Honeycutt, 77 Base X, Brian McMurray, Karen S, Charles Rogers, Rick Ross, Sandra Jean, Charles Gilmore, Greg, Barry Little, Mr. Valentino, Cameron 87, Dr. Rock, Mark Swift, Odd Collar, Donna Watts, Coach Hotep, Old Soul Chief, Mr. Blue Collar, TD Hip Hop Media, Drew Main, Mr. Heat, Sir Anthony, and ML Law. Big up to y'all, man. Also, big up to Universal 178, Rasheed Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, Red Pill Revelator, Aaron Infinite, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Kalan Chakala, Hostile Adept, and WPR1. And I can't forget the brethren, Forrest Windu, David Carroll, and Kevin Samuels. Also, on the Patreon side, I'd like to give a shout out to Chris Flowers, Christopher Burton, Daxby, J Live, Rashawn Phillips, Keith Bass, Nick, Albert C, Dr. Ben Vincent, J Cleveland Green, I'm the Light of My Father, Waffle Weave, Tyrone Hampton, Darnell Smith, Excalibur, Prisoner Taz, Dragon 59, Jay Bailey, Mr. Michi Momal, and Asangwa. Big up to all of y'all, man. I appreciate your help and your support. Thank you. You deserve a round of applause. Thank you so much for your help. And if you're wondering how you could support the Green Gorilla channel on an ongoing basis, here's how you do it, and we'll be back with what we got to do.
What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Today, I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless.
All right, y'all, we back. I'm GG. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. I brought my man Admiral Smoke with me today, my frat brother. You know, what's good with you, man? How you doing?
What's going on, dog? Who do you?
What's good, dog, Rue? You know, Nameless will not be here today. He, I think he has some work commitments or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I would have named the show something different, but, you know, it is what it is, man. Shout out to Nameless.
Yeah.
You know,
Nah, man, he's coming back, man. So for the part 2 and stuff for this, man, he'll be here, God willing.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. So it basically, man, what I got today for y'all, man, this is just an introductory. So remember, we did part 1, which was situation. So the operations order paragraph, right, in terms of how forces or how we mobilize, you know, for war. Right, and that could be for the different types of war that exist, hot war, cold war. You know, we'll kind of go into a little bit of it today. So we talked about the situation, which is where you talk about what the terrain and what's happening in that environment, and then from there you would end up, you know, with the mission statement, right? And so that's paragraph 2. And now what we're doing now is we're getting into paragraph 3. So paragraph 3 is the execution phase of the plan. But we kind of wanted to give a prelude to it because, you know, years of talking in this space, a lot of people think that, you know, you could just jump up and punch somebody in the face and grab a rifle and punch somebody in the face. And that's how, you know, that's how freedom you know, that's how freedom works. And one, let me make the disclaimer right now, right? So we're not planning anything or any nonsense like that, right? We are, you know, this is to kind of show you, you know, how institutions work, how state institutions and non-state institutions work. So we're using, you know, we're using the tools of physical warfare and non-physical warfare to show how different institutions at the state level come together and work to achieve their objectives and goals. So this is basically what this is. And so, like I said, so now, you know, before we get into the execution phase of it, this is something that I want you guys to learn is that there's a huge strategic and kind of, you know, more so a logistics process that goes into all of this, and it just doesn't happen overnight. And so as we kind of go through this PowerPoint presentation, you know, we can kind of take quick breaks and talk about moments of Black history that might remind you of these particular circumstances that we've been through. So, you know, so when you get people within the African American spaces who are going to say, well, how come we just didn't do this? Or how come we just didn't do that? Hopefully this will give you insight into, hopefully this will give you a little bit of insight to how limited we were. And I believe collectively for both men and women involved in the process of our freedom have done an excellent job with what they were given. So, Gigi, if
hold on, let me stop you here, man. Like one of the things, you know, like you said, one of the things you got to be mindful of is that, you know, in order to execute any kind of, you know, war effort, you have to practice. You have to go through, you know, training, and schematics have to be studied and practiced and gone over again and again. So it's like second nature. You just don't, like, say, for example, I was to just say, okay, I want to be an MMA fighter. I can't just get in the octagon right now and just start beating up people, man. Yeah. I'm going to get folded up like a pretzel and I'm going to get knocked out because I haven't trained. And it takes years of training and development of your body to be acclimated to the kind of punishment you're going to subject it to be a halfway decent fighter. I mean, and, you know, like even like say, for example, basketball, okay? You can't just assemble a ragtag group of 5 guys and have them play with a group of guys who've been playing together for like maybe 2 or 3 years. They will eat you alive on the court. Especially if they, you know, if they practice plays and schemes, they know where each other's, you know, what each other's spacing is going to be on the court. You have no chance, even if they're not as physically, you know, they're not as physically astute as you are. So I mean, this whole notion that, you know, we need to get out there and show some bravery. Like, man, come on, you know how much planning and logistics go into, you know, developing any form of resistance at all. It's miraculous that we, you know, like the civil rights movement, you know, was the way it was. Because them people had to prepare for that. It wasn't like, okay, well, we just going to take anybody who volunteers and we just going to go out there. No, they had to train for days, weeks, months. Correct. In order to prepare themselves for what they were going to encounter when they were engaging in this, you know, these forms of protest. So, you know, we just here to dispel the notions about how easy it is. You know what I mean? And this goes for the nationalists too, because you got a lot of nationalists, you know, a lot of Afrocentrics out there, and they never discuss this shit. They just act like, you know, like we just lack courage and resolve, and so that's it. Like all we need is that. All we need are virtues, and you know, everything else will work itself out. Like how many nationalist guys do you see talking about tactics? All they do is lionize people in the struggle who've gone before, without offering any real, you know, schemas to do anything, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, and it's one thing to have values and ideals and norms, but how do you carry out those values and norms in the way that you desire without even developing any kind of, you know, exercises related to anything that remotely resembles something militaristic? It's absolutely absurd to me. But anyway, man, you take over, man. I'm gonna let you do what you do.
Correct. So yeah, man. So again, you know, just, you know, we're sharing, you know, a lot of the same sentiments here. So fam, if you could you you know, just bring up the stuff that I sent you, and then, you know, we could go ahead and get it cracking.
All right. So that's what you told me to show.
Correct.
So,
yeah, man.
So let me view, arrange to slideshow, play from the start. All right, so there we go.
Okay. All right, and so you have what's called the priorities of work. So now, once you get to a tactical assembly area, and I'll explain what that is, but once you get to a tactical assembly area, you engage in what's called the priorities of work before you even go off into battle, right? And so now I'm going to start to talk about what happens when you deploy into battle, and then what happens in the tactical assembly area. And then I'm going to end it because next week, Nameless is going to come back with the rest of it that we had planned. And so that way he could come in on top of what I'm saying for next week. But this is to just show you that the amateurs deal in tactics, but the masters deal in logistics. So for all the people who think that you could just jump up and punch your problems in the face as they exist in today's society, you have another thing coming. And now remember, this is the quote unquote hot part of it, right? So the other part of it that's going to come is how war is waged with both hard power and soft power, and then how they bring it all together to make smart power, right? And so we're gonna dive into how both state and non-state institutions all work to pull this off, and it's bigger than your love of God and the twinkle that you have in your eye, and you know, the Black woman is God, man, and child, and whatever other stuff that we want to live on. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. So,
yeah, and again, Nameless will not be here today. He is, you know, he has a commitment And he can't be here today. He'll be here next week. So anyway, let's go.
Yeah. So we'll go. So, okay. So now, right, the definition of war. So one definition of war is a state of armed conflict between countries or different groups within the country, right? So now, again, right, so people just don't hop up and just do it. So in the past, right, nations could declare war on each other for the reasons that you would go to war, which is going to come up soon that we're going to talk about. But now we have a process where, okay, the president will go before Congress, and then even then, the United States government or other governments will go up in front of the UN, and then there'll probably be probably a series of remedies that at least that they will attempt to do to avoid conflict. But again, we're living in a time now, especially where you see outliers like the war in Iraq and then what's happening, in the Ukraine now. Right. So now, if you're looking at African Americans, right, and you've heard Sandog say this before about independence and the fact of you having your own state. So a state is an institutional body that does what? That creates laws and enforces them. So if you look at African Americans, right, there's not even a collective moral code that we share. So let alone talking about, getting up, jumping up and down with the Eye of Ra tattooed on my forehead, right, that I'm going to kick down the institutions that have denied me citizenship, for so long, right? Okay, state of competition or hostility between different people or groups, right? So again, when you look at what the United States was formed, right? Abraham Lincoln, Manifest Destiny, the Burgesses of Virginia. So what did they want to do? They were competing with the Native Americans or the indigenous people of the United States, right, for the land and whatever resources, that were on it, right? And so sad and most unfortunately, many of these people don't exist today in order to get everything that from Maine all the way to Alaska, right? And so now, war was declared on these people in order to obtain the landmass that you now know, as the United States. And so this is where the competition is. So again, at that particular time for us, we're in a state of slavery. We're not competing for anything, right? We are just cogs in a machine. We're here to make that machine money, pick cotton, eat, sleep, crap, and die. So for the people who are like, oh man, we could have just revolted, we could have done this. Because for most people, remember, you're born on that plantation and you die on that plantation, right? So you don't know the land, you know nothing, you don't know anything for the most part about the outside world, right? You don't have any allegiances, you don't have any access to supply chain and manufacturing. So, I mean, you could have an insurgency, which might be an immediate solution, but it's not an overall. It's not an overall solution. So, if you wanted to go from one plantation to the next, as they say, an army marches on its stomach, right? So, if you're going from one plantation to the next, how are you sustaining all of these people, especially a large number of them being women and children, right? How are they eating? How are they drinking water? Where's the medicine? Where are you getting guns and bullets from? Again, all these other things, right? A sustained campaign against the undesirable situation or activity, right? And so a lot of us have heard, the war on drugs, the war against poverty, the war against hunger. And these campaigns could both be hard and soft, but a lot of you, especially when you look at the war on drugs, so you would have things like, again, Just Say No, you might have some positive rap songs out there, and everything else. So on television, right, you had this kind of soft power campaign of, staying away from drug dealers and saying no to drugs. But on the streets, it was flat out war, right? And so you had police departments pretty much who were given a free hand by the federal government to do the things that they allegedly needed to do to clean up the streets. And for Black America, that came with serious types of consequences, right? And so again, so in these kind of like as it relates to the United States, or the African American experience in the United States, these are some of the examples that I'm trying to, draw together, right? Or when you talk about a state of competition or hostility between different groups of people, I mean, again, shout out to Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, and, the other cities that will be lost or destroyed after that, or
Right.
even, yeah.
Yeah, the thing that was important that you talked about to me was, like the army or like a militaristic campaign is only going to go so far as, as it can based upon whether or not you're able to feed the troops and to make sure that they have supplies and, that they have weapons. Okay. And I mean, there's different kinds of supplies. So, I mean, you can have a weapon supply, ammunition supply. You could have medical supplies, because I mean, if you're going to have, if you're going to be engaged in battle and fighting, you're going to have casualties. You're going to have to intern bodies at some point. You're going to have a place to sleep, in between skirmishes. You're going to have food in order to sustain the energy to fight. You're going to have weapons and a way to gain access to either making them on site or, having them dropped in from outside sources. So, I mean, it's a lot that goes into developing some sort of campaign to where, I'm talking about hard war. Not to even get to the point where you can have a hard war, you have to have a population that has a culture that understands that it needs to defend itself from potential hostility from different people or groups.
Correct. So you might have to take a plantation or several plantations to establish what would be a LSA, right? A logistical support area. So again, this would be, where your hospitals are, where's your food, where's this? Because remember, for soldiers, again, we have bases. When we go to war, guess what, right? If Sandal got shot in Afghanistan, right? There's Bagram Airfield, there's Kandahar Airfield. And, shout out to the Air Force or whatever pilots, right? They'll stabilize me. And if I need anything more, I get taken to Germany, right? So again, these are all the things when you talk about, getting up, going to warfare and all of this. And I'm keeping it very simple. Like I left out a lot of stuff, but I tried to focus on what's important, those concepts, so that way we can get people to stop talking reckless about our condition and the idea that you could just punch your way out of it. Could you go to the next slide?
And look, this primarily goes out, like, believe it or not, to me, this is important for nationalist persons who put forth this idea of black solidarity and, as if, we need to have some sort of nationalistic orientation towards blackness such that we can begin to carry out functions like war if necessary, whether it be soft or hard, okay? Like, there's a lot that goes into this. And I don't hear anybody talking about the logistics associated with carrying out the ideals that they present. I don't too often hear anybody from the nationalistic camps saying anything about how to actually do what it is that they have an ideal about, or to manifest a value that they have. So it's a lot that goes into this, okay? And another thing that today, Sandal won't talk about it or discuss it, but war is not just something that men do, okay? Women also are involved in wartime efforts, okay? And the ethos of a culture that will go to war, okay? Have women at the center of it, okay? So it's not just something that, men do. I mean, although, carrying out hard, war is something that men do primarily, but I mean, it requires more than just a bunch of guys standing around deciding that, they're going to go fight another group of men. Like, for example, you think that, women weren't involved in wartime efforts in America at all? All you got to do is just do a Google search, women in wartime. What kind of roles did they serve? They smuggled weapons. They were spies. Many of them, like Sandog was telling me, planned war campaigns. I mean, it wasn't like they were hands off, like just sitting, living their soft lives while the men took all the responsibilities of going out there and fighting. Okay, like look at like a militaristic campaign that America was involved in that kind of went awry, like Vietnam. You think women weren't out there in Vietnam fighting to protect their homeland or their turf?
Fam, they were with me in Iraq. So I told you that, man, side by side.
And but the thing is, when you got a bunch of bourgeois black people who don't have any idea about what war entails, because for the most part they've been westernized, and to them a successful life for the most part pretty much entails living a life of conspicuous consumption, okay? And having a title which gives them access to a job which enables them to then live a life of conspicuous consumption, right? This is what, American society tells you success is, okay? Like, they're not even taking on the task of doing what's requisite to being in a position to where you can resist. And not to say this has never happened in Black history, but I dare say it's not happening at the current moment.
Yes.
I don't see anybody getting ready to form any kind of resistance other than maybe perhaps people who are, community service activists or people who have like, they're professional, civil disobedient organizers type of thing like that, like BLM or something like that. But that model to me is outdated, okay? It's just, I have several reasons why I think that is, but public spaces, once they became opened up for everyone, now it's not radical to open up a public space that's already been opened up. It's just not. That's just my viewpoint. Like at one time, Black people could not exist in public or, private businesses. They couldn't be in those spaces without, being subjected to harsh and punitive, sanctions. But now, I mean, those are for the most part been removed, okay? So it's not a shock anymore. So like you're creating a spectacle, but to do what? In order to attain what? In order to generate attention? Okay. But the attention, does that necessarily, result in some sort of attendant change? That's the issue. Okay. So anyway, man, I'm gonna let you continue to go on, bro.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So why do nations go to war? Right. So you have militarism. Right. So again, you have mania, the acronym. Right. And so policy of building up a strong military to prepare for war. Right. So when you look at the United States, right, how we control the Western Hemisphere, right, the Monroe Doctrine, or how we have the idea or the philosophy of full spectrum operations, which is that we will control land, sea, air, and now space. Right. So again, right. So when you're talking about, again, I have the power, I have the strength, and I have the capability. Again, I have the capability to do so, right? Or to move on people that I would deem, perhaps weaker than myself. Again, alliances, agreements between nations to provide aid and protect one another. So again, shout out to the UN, shout out to BRICS. Now, for African Americans, right? Haiti is decimated, right? You have no connections to Africa, zero, right? Who are you tied to in Polynesia or Asia or anywhere else? None. And so that will be the thing, because even if you're looking at the South in the Civil War, right, chances are, right, they were able to get aid, at least from countries with manufacturing bases, right? So they were able to get aid that way. Because remember, that's one of the reasons why the South lost to the North, is because the South didn't have a manufacturing base. It was, for the most part, agrarian, right? And so, again, this is something of logistical or supply chain significance, right? That a lot of people overlook in dealing with this. So for African Americans, what alliance or connections to anybody, again, that you would have, right? And African Americans are not, for the most part, engaged in radical, violent activity, right? So we may be politically radical, right? But in terms of radicalism and violence, that's not our MO, and that's not how we work. So so all of that nonsense with the Red Scare and MLK is a communist and all these other things, all of that stuff for the most part is nonsensical, right? So again, we don't we don't have those alliances. We don't have ties, to any other country to do again, to do the types of things that some people at a time in the American government will claim that we are capable of, right? Again, nationalism, right? Extreme pride in one's country. Again, shout out to World War II Germany, right? After the Treaty of Versailles, where the Germans felt humiliated in a sense by the rest of Europe and pushed out. And then, you get Adolf Hitler, who horrifically decides that, my scapegoat is a segment of this population, right? And so now you kind of get like this nationalistic, approach that, that Germans are ultimately, people who have fair skin are better than anyone else. And that comes out with disastrous consequences, right? And then, again, imperialism, right? Hey, hey, what's the name of this land? Oh, this is Angola. Do you have a flag? No, what's a flag? It's this, right? Bam. Now, now this is France or whatever it is that you're going to call it, right? So the idea of, okay, hey, I have a bigger stick than you, and again, I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, right? That I have a bigger stick than you, I have better technology than you, or larger numbers than you. And at the end of the day, what's yours is now mine, and you can get down or lay down, right? And so, again, so for us, at the end of the day, especially once you're in the United States of America, you're outnumbered, you don't have a manufacturing base or a supply chain. Realistically, what are you going to do, right?
Yeah, one of the things people are unaware of, like the South, during the Civil War, they bought weapons from the British.
Yeah.
And the British would sell weapons to both. Man, you had munitions manufacturers, man, selling weapons to both sides at the same time, bro.
Correct.
So I mean, but like, does anybody black have access to munitions and weapons, man, other than, like some, startup militia, where you got like gun enthusiasts who are collecting bullets from like that ain't enough bullets, bro. Like going to Walmart and buying some bullets, man. Correct. That's not gonna be enough, bro.
Yeah, but even under the slave codes, guess what? You could not travel and you could not conduct business. So how are you gonna be in a position to obtain the alliances, the supply chain, and the technology to do anything? This is what I'm trying to say. You can't at that point, right? It's illegal for you to read. So again, you tell me, how do you punch your way out of this? Right?
And the last one is assassination. Like if somebody attempts to destabilize your government or your nation state by killing its leader, correct, then that would be a reason to go to war.
Correct. So, and so for us, when Martin Luther King was killed, right, what could you, there were riots in the streets, right? But at the end of the day, you could not, quote unquote, pick up and go to war with the United States, right? And so, like I said, so I'm hoping, again, as we go through this, for certain people, especially like you said, for certain groups of people, that may be out there, I really do hope that that this presentation, to some degree, is, like I said, it's sobering, right? And realistically, in today's world, to be honest with you, revolution happens in the matter of, it really does. And I know it's kind of difficult because the economic landscape doesn't necessarily support it. But to be honest with you, it will come from people, for the most part, who have traditional, who have traditional ideas and views, sticking together and working together to deal with the aspects of the system that have now, come awry. Right. And so this is something that the American public or people will ultimately have to find answers for, within themselves to fix their problems. But you go to the next slide. All right. And so you got 5 types of war, right? So again, you got trade and economic wars, right? Imposing protectionist and policies and trade barriers. So, and this is what I'm trying to say. So Haiti kicks out the French, and what happens?
Embargoes.
That's all. This is what I'm saying. And where is Haiti today?
Man, in a bad financial way, still beholden to pay reparations to France.
Well, again, what happened to the Caribbean, right? So the British are gone, right, out of the Caribbean. And what happens, right? So for their products, they get higher tariffs and all of those things, put on their products, and as a result, they're not competitive, in the market with whatever the things that they have to sell.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a hell of a thing, man. Like, like a nation, really, actually, Haiti should be paid reparations from France as opposed to the other way. Because, I mean, you got to think about what that signals to the world. I mean, basically, it signals that you made us lose, your slave labor.
Correct.
You destroyed our capacity to profit off your exploitation. And so we want to, in the future, in perpetuity, to benefit from that labor. So if you don't want us to obliterate, and to keep the embargoes, just to totally isolate you, this is what you have to do.
Yes. Correct. And sad and most unfortunately, right, the Congo can't stand up at the UN and tell the world there'll be no more laptops or Super Bowl for you, right, if you don't pay back Haiti.
I think, I don't think they're paying now, but I do know.
No, they're not. But that's what I'm saying.
But they did pay, like Haiti did pay.
No, Haiti paid the French, yes.
Right. Up to $30 billion, bro. The equivalent of between $20 to $30 billion. And it took them 122 years to pay it off. And they still haven't recovered from that. And they knew that it would be difficult for them to recover from having to pay such amounts, exorbitant amounts of money, for nothing other than the embarrassment that the French received from the Haitians having revolted, when the entire revolutionary spirit was something that was conjured up in the geographical space called France.
Correct.
Which is ironic, but go ahead, bro.
Yeah, and then so now you get technology, right? So you have technology wars. Shout out to America and Russia in terms of who will go to space, who will be the first to get on the moon, right? Again, and then you have the U.S.-China tech war with, computer chips, microchips, and everything else, right? And so who's going to take all of this technology, be able to master it, and have the heavier influence on trade and military action, right? And so now, when you look at the space, we just talked about Haiti. How is Haiti in a position to compete with this, with what's happened to Haiti, right? How is Nigeria or Congo or any of these other countries prepared to compete with this, with what's happened there and what it is that they need to repair? Right? So when you talk about, like, for many of you, I know many of you have never seen a damn supersonic or hypersonic jet up close. I have. I know many of you haven't seen howitzers shoot off. I have. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how many of you have seen tanks, Apache helicopters, and all of these things shoot off. These are marvelous feats of technology, right? That require God knows how many dollars of research and development, the technological planning, engineering, etc. Right? And so now, when you look at so for a lot of us, right, who kind of have that super hotep spirit, again, you can even set aside African Americans. The Haitians pushed out the French and had their own state. And what happened? The other Western powers ganged up on them and kept them poor on purpose, right? The same way as they did with Zimbabwe or some of these other places, right? And so now, how are you gonna compete? Where's your Amun Ra? Where's your Ma'at Jet 21 that's gonna compete with an F-22 Raptor?
Yo, you just need, you just a coward. You just won't stand up.
Yeah.
Or, both men and women say this, though. It's not, we can't just say that it's women that say this. It's men that say this, too. Well, all we got to do is just have solidarity. Like, no, bro, it's going to take more than just solidarity. And it's going to take more than just familial solidarity as well. I mean, we can't even get that right. There is no familial solidarity, but, with black folks. There isn't, okay? So, there's no nationalistic ethos, no nationalistic culture at all. Like, it's just a bunch of individuals going for dolo. I mean, am I misrepresenting the facts here? I mean, not to say that black communities don't exist and that black people don't agglomerate and that there is no culture at all that one could refer to as black, but there is no heterogeneous black culture. There is no heterogeneous nationalistic ideal about what black people ought to be doing. It's just a bunch of Negroes who've been westernized who are doing what's best for themselves.
Correct. Well,
but at the same time that exists, you got a whole group of people saying, well, if you don't, no disrespect to the Umars or whatever the case may be, they serve their functions or whatever, but come on, man, we got to be realistic, bro.
No.
We're not even being anywhere near realistic about this. Yeah. Okay? And women have to be down with this too, though. It can't just be like, okay, it's a group of guys who are planning by themselves, and plotting and strategizing how to develop this kind of culture, in contradistinction to the women. Like, no, men and women have to be in agreement about the value of the culture that they have. And the nationalistic ideal has to be promoted amongst both of them. You think the daughters of the Confederacy, them women who are on the side of the South, or the Confederacy, you think that them women, man, were not like diehard nationalists about the Confederacy?
Correct.
And the same with the women who, supported the Union. You think they weren't diehard supporters of the Union? I mean, there might have been oscillation and back and forth because, the unique situation related to Civil War. But come on, man, it's not even like during World War I and II. Like, one could argue that second wave feminism was given birth to because of the Second World War, the First and the Second World Wars.
Yes.
That you wouldn't even have feminism if it wasn't for like Rosie the Riveter and the concept related to it. Like, if they weren't nationalistic and patriotic, they wouldn't have been part of the war effort, manufacturing munitions and so on and so forth and supplies that gave them the independence and the idea that they, okay, well, I don't necessarily have to be tethered, to a mononuclear family. I can have independence. But that was an outgrowth, one could argue, of the war effort.
Correct.
So, like this idea that, you guys have to do. And then also you got to think about this. Who are the primary educators of children who, instill ideas about nationalism and solidarity? Who is it that performs that function? It's women who are going to be primarily responsible for doing that.
Yes.
So anyway, man. Keep on, bro. Go ahead.
Correct. Yeah. And so, like I said, this is what I'm trying to say. So now, again, you got geopolitical, right? Wars between countries and regions to obtain material right? Because these are the things behind geopolitics, right? Material, relational, and ideological power, right? So again, the material, right? The numbers that nation has, its resources, and everything else, right? And then, your ideological power, again, whatever right that you feel or that they believe that gives them access to that land, right?
And I just want to answer one thing really quickly, just to let people know, right? Okay, so when you start talking about who's going to fight wars, I mean, older men typically organize war, okay? They're not out in trenches and shit fighting. Like, the average age of somebody out fighting, actually physically fighting a war, how old are those people, man?
Fuck, man, they're like in their late teens or early 20s, man.
You talking about like people just like 1 year removed from high school, if that much. Like a college age kid.
A college age, yes, correct.
Okay? Are you talking about a college age kid?
Yeah.
Now, that's a kid. You can get a kid. You have to educate and indoctrinate a kid to be willing to go lay his life down. There's no other way to do that, okay? And a lot of times people's mothers demand that they go out and fight and protect their country. I mean, so the idea that, okay, we can do all this by ourselves, how are you going to get the support to do it? When you're off at war, who's going to hold down the bases? Who's going to hold it down? Like, if you don't, you can't do this unilaterally. It takes a community to engage in wartime efforts. It's not something that men do by themselves. I'm trying to let people know that. Like, if you feel like war can be conducted just by guys with no support from their women, that's not going to happen.
Correct.
It will not happen. First of all, you're not going to have the sentiment instilled within the youth to make them prideful or nationalistic such that they will think that they have something to fight for. Okay? You need a system of propaganda and indoctrination in order to get people to feel like they ought to risk their lives to fight for something. Otherwise, they're going to be like, what am I fighting for? Who's going to fight for people that are in constant loggerheads with, and you black people don't even love themselves. I show that video all the time where kids, like I'm talking about I'm talking about the early childhood development years, 6 to 12. These kids think that they're bad and ugly. Why would they fight for them? They won't even fight. They'll fight amongst themselves because they believe that they're the worst type of human beings. They won't think that they have something to preserve or to protect. They're going to try to hurt each other. We're laying out the reality, man. Not some ideal, Braveheart, feel-good pep speech. We're talking about the reality of war itself and the logistics to go into planning and actually having the capacity to resist. It's not just some ad hoc, I'm brave. It's emblematic of stupidity as far as I'm concerned, to think like that. And to think you can do it alone. And and BGS is right, like schools, there has to be a system of education in place to indoctrinate children in order to change their moral values or whatever kind of values they have. Now, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You're not going to get 35-year-old guys to have a different mindset once they've been educated and indoctrinated into a particular cultural pattern. You got to start with kids. But who's the primary educator of kids?
Mothers.
I'm just saying, who's going to teach the children nationalism? Why you think white women are going to do it? Because primarily our kids are taught by white women. Let's just keep it a buck, dog. Black children primarily are taught by white women in the public school system. That's just the facts, bro. Now you can hate it or love it, but that's just the damn truth. That's a fact. And then, like Incognito say, now they teaching your kid, fuck them.
Yeah.
We want you to sit when you piss. That's okay. You say, Timmy, you want to be Trina? Okay. We got some medicine for you. Go ahead, bro. I want to stop talking. Hey, yo, and please support the Green Gorilla channel, man. Please. Thank you.
So, again, and, this is one of BGS's personal favorites, right? Capital Wars, right? So, again, if you look at America, right, the fact that, when you look at Bretton Woods institutions, right, that pretty much gives us, when people agreed that the dollar would be the world's reserve currency, and as a result of that, right, that gives America the ability, or especially at a particular point in time of history, to control the flow of money, to influence banking, trade, and investment globally, right? So, again, if you notice, one of the part of when we go to war, right, somebody's money gets cut off, right? There's sanctions. So if you look at Iran right now, there's sanctions, right? Okay, I want to put pressure on Putin with the oligarchs, right? So I'm turning off bank accounts. I'm turning off trade routes, access to ports, and all of these other things, right? And so again, if you look at us as a whole, for African Americans in our entirety, please tell me what form of currency or monetary systems that we control. So even if you look at Africans themselves, right, how are you in debt to the IMF when those raw minerals that you have in the ground is worth more than the currency of the countries that influence the IMF? Right. So again, I'll go back and do more research, but I would love to know how much a kilogram of Coltrane costs, right? Or the current or current markets for gold and other commodities that exist, so again, that exist within Africa, right? Because again, that entire certain countries alone, or that continent as a whole, could actually back their currency with their commodities, where that's not true for everyone else, right? And so when you look at when you look at how some of us think in our community that black men are weak, and if only these people did this, if only these people did that, man, this is a much more complicated system than what you think it is. Again, I refer back to Haiti, right? And then the military, right? Which is, again, this is armed conflicts between states and governments, right? Intense armed conflicts. So again, this is World War II. This is the Korean War. This is the Vietnam War, where again, it's hot and heavy, bullets are flying, and then, years later, Hollywood will make a film. So
how do you respond to somebody who says something like Christopher Harlan is saying? What? And basically he's saying, well, women have been weaponized against you. He says basically that believing you need the cooperation of women who've been weaponized against you to secure sovereignty is insanity. How do you respond to that?
Society doesn't work without women. It just doesn't. If the women check out, see, because remember, a lot of us have a very American perspective on things, right? So if women check out, again, both women and men need each other to do their parts in society. But for the most part, right, because again, men create a culture, but the women are the ones that maintain it and pass it on. So if they check out from it, fam, you have nothing.
So again,
yeah.
The idea is this: who rears children? Who's responsible for the early childhood development of children and the ideals that they have about themselves and their place in the world?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that men don't have a part to play in this, But to argue that you can create a nationalistic young male or female, anybody, without the cooperation of, mothers, is absurd. It can't be done, bro. What you gonna do? Just start talking to men when they're 18 and then try to convince them at that age to take on a nationalistic viewpoint so that they can attain freedom and sovereignty? How does that work? You already see what black guys in this space are talking about. They're not talking about saving the community. They saying fuck the community. Or maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm wrong about it. Am I wrong about it? Or men saying save yourself, black men? Or are they saying, hey, let's try to find a way to rally the troops and turn this shit around? Or is men like saying, fuck it, I'm going somewhere else and getting a foreign woman and start my legacy with this chick?
Yeah, to go be absorbed somewhere else. Look, so for example, if you, like I said, again, and like I said, for Christopher, I get his point, right? Again, shout out to the Million Man March, right? So for black women in America, the thing from my perspective would have been to get behind the Million Man March and support black men in that agenda, but they turned around and had their own march.
So, look, I'm not saying, look, the one thing I'm not saying is that, like, it's impossible for men, to be on some, like, I hate these bitches type attitude and to start a war, but, like, it ain't gonna go that far.
No.
It's just not, bro.
Yeah, society, family, society, all of that that requires the cooperation of men and women, because at that one without the other, you don't have society as we know it. You just you like I said, you just don't, and that's and again that comes back to what I was telling you. Again, behind the scenes is that I know that there are many of us, right? When we look at, women or some of the issues that they have, but what you have to understand is that with this phenomena, right, men and women are going to address this differently. Male psychology and female psychology is not the same. How men and women think, how men and women socialize, how they may respond to violence or certain types of situations. It's very different. I remember taking a psychology course, when I was undergrad, and there was a woman who was, I don't know, she was above 6 feet, and she had been raped by a guy who was 5'3", right? And so, again, just looking at them, right, you would think that this woman could beat this man to a pulp, but the psychology was that I am a woman and that is a man, right? And therefore, he could overpower me and do the things that he did. And so what I'm asking a lot of us to do is to take a step back and examine how men and women deal with things differently. So, like, for example, let's talk about war, right? Let's say this is 1000 AD. And Sandog shows up and kills off the men of your tribe and village. Guess what happens to your women? They become a part of my tribe, right? Some of your sons, I may keep them and raise them as my own, or I may kill them, right? But for many species of animals, to include human beings, right? Because that's one of the reasons why in places like Afghanistan or even Arabia, where women wear the full burqa, that comes before Islam, and that was used to disguise the women so you didn't know who was old and who was young, and it would be a deterrent from you kidnapping them. Right. So at the end of the day, right, for human beings, right, the fact that we're this tournament species and everything else, right, chances are if you study female psychology, maybe there's already something built in that says, hey, if Sandog shows up with his crew to your village and take you all out, right, your women are now our women and your kids are, they're left to fate. And so again, these, I think for me, I believe is that these are things that need to be examined further in our space is male and female psychology, and how our perceptions based upon our sex, how we see things, right? Sand Dog is 6 feet even, right? 230 pounds, right? I could take most men and throw them across the room. So if I'm out, if I'm walking the streets of Pakistan and Karachi at 1 a.m., right? Me and my female counterpart don't have the same concerns. And those things create different psychologies.
Right, for true indeed. But I don't want us to get stuck on this. I do want to shout out MLR. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, man. I appreciate that. Please support the channel if you can. We just trying to be realistic, man. This is not about blaming. Like, this transcends a gender war. Like, if you want to go to war for real, you got to transcend gender war bullshit.
Yeah.
You have to. If you're going to war, you got to transcend all of the factionalism and all the idiosyncratic bullshit that you blame each other for. Like, you have to. Like, that's got to be nipped in the bud. But you can't nip it in the bud precisely because you can't factor in indoctrination into early childhood of black kids. Black kids grow up to hate themselves and to think that they're inferior, or they don't have any kind of nationalistic outlook at all. They perceive themselves as black versions of Westerners. That's it. That's like the Jews in Greece or in Rome during the Roman era. They were Hellenized. They were Grecophile. Yes. They were Jews who didn't have a Jewish nationalistic identity.
Yes.
It is what it is. So I mean, we're just. So look, we're gonna let Christopher come up to speak briefly, but we got to get through this thing. So I'm gonna let him come in real quick. Only one individual, because he's got to go. Okay. So I'm gonna let you make a statement, and then we'll respond to the statement, and then but I want you to go as far as you can now, and then I'll interrupt when he comes up. That's for you, Sandog.
Okay. What?
So.
Okay, so now when we talk about warfare, right? And when I first came to this space, right, and I said, hey, I'm Republican, and a lot of people got upset, right? Oh, how could you, what do you believe? How could you get into this? And how could you get into that, right? And when I came and I began to explain my position, and I said, look, as Claude Anderson, correct? That's what he said. Racism is a team sport. And so again, at the end of the day, right, there's no black state or a real black political identity. You kind of get in where you fit in, right? And so for most African Americans, right, and the reason why is my segue into this, right? So the adverse response to, okay, I'm conservative in thought, or when most people think of racism, they think of the things that you see, right? And this is what hard power is, right? And so these are the forms of contact, right? Which are visual, right? So the first form of contact is observation, right? What you see. Direct fire, right? This is guns, rifles, and everything else. Indirect fire is artillery. Contact with obstacles, this is engineering, right? So combat engineers are the people that put in the landmines and the booby traps and
trenches and shit.
Yeah, and trenches and everything else that's on the battlefield, right? Enemy aircraft, aviation, right? Again, electronic warfare, right? Hey, my little tablet doesn't work, right? I can't watch Ninja Turtles, right? And then, NBC, a nuclear, biological, and chemical attack, right?
Or other kinds of structural warfare, like I'm cutting you don't have any electricity, but not only that, you don't have any water or gas, okay? Yeah. Like, or you don't have access to foodstuffs. Like we're like, that's what sieges are built on. Like, okay, we're gonna starve them out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. but at any rate, Chris Harlan is here, and he wants to have a conversation really quickly. And again, he's got to make a statement and then bounce because Sand Dog's on borrowed time. So and then I'm gonna let the other brother ask a question or make a comment and then bounce. Chris, what's going on, bro?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate the work that you all are doing. And for me, the first thing that I want to say is that the specific context of the ADOS male struggle goes against this historical requirement that may be the norm, because our women have been weaponized against us, and it's not recent. There's even, you all, Green, you basically have a whole channel that details on a daily basis the misandry of our women against our men, from cradle to the grave. And so that trying to then say, women or any faction for that matter, who has been weaponized against you for a prolonged period of time to where it is now the weaponization is cultural, is intergenerational, to say that you have to build your house on that foundation when we as ADOS men and ADOS males for that matter are suffering disproportionately is just not going to work. That equation mathematically is not going to add up. That's
and my response, and we can't spend an inordinate amount of time on this.
Okay.
My response to that would, and I don't want to get too protracted about this. We're not saying this is not descriptive. It is to a certain extent descriptive in telling you, okay, this is what is requisite in order to engage in what you have an idea about what ought to be done. So, like, say, for example, some people have the value that we ought to resist, we ought to be, more sovereign, we ought to be more nationalistic, we ought to be more courageous and militaristic and stand and fight, okay, instead of acquiesce and integrate, okay? There are groups of people out there like that, okay? Mm-hmm. And we're saying if you want that, here's what has to occur. These are the preconditions of what you say you want. Now, I'm not saying it's possible. Mm-hmm. We're saying it's damn near impossible given the state of affairs that exists contemporarily as well. So there's nothing that we're saying that really actually is in disagreement with what you're saying.
Okay. Well, I guess then for me, the reality is just to accept the fact that fighting, let alone winning, even in ideal conditions, which is this cooperation between men and women that I wanted to specifically to, speak about.
But let me interrupt you, bro. Look, first of all, it would require men to cooperate among themselves for as well. Like it ain't no strange secret. The number one battle-aged men in our community are more hostile towards each other than they are towards anybody else. And at a percentage rate higher than any other population in the United States. We're a small population. We're only 13% of the population. But a larger proportion of us are out to kill each other over the smallest slights than any other demographic in this country. So it would take us to not hate each other as well, because black men got a problem with each other as well. Now I'd like to tell the truth. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't. I look out for black men. I want to pat black men on the back. You know what I'm saying? I want black men to be aware of like the dangers they face and the injustices that they're subjected to. I want them to understand how the system works against them, how, other people have it better than they do. Like, I have no issue with that. I think that that's something that ought to be done. But like when it comes to some of the values ourselves that we lacking sometimes as well. It ain't like, I'm not just about to say that we all like black men are perfect out here. I'm not about to do that, because to do that would be to lie about our condition. We got some deep-seated problems our goddamn selves. You know what I'm saying? No. So like one of the things people don't know, like I was trying to explain, like the origin of the term virtue comes from the the Latin word vir, which basically means male, okay? But that is a cognate or a synonym of the Greek word arete, which basically is a reference to Ares, the god of war. Now, one thing that you got to know about war, even being like, you know how they say ain't no iron team? Like if you're in a war effort, that's how you got to perceive the people that you're fighting with. It ain't just about me and saving me. It's about saving my squad, my platoon, my squadron. It's bigger than just you. You see what I'm saying? So but right now you got a lot of puffed up black guys, man. You know, they feel like they the shit. And I'm not saying women aren't, prey to this kind of, I call it like Rousseau would call it amour propre, like this vanity. Like I'm better than you, predicated upon some superficial aspect of Western culture and society that makes people feel like they stand out and above the next person. It's usually predicated upon some materialistic bullshit that's hyperinflated anyway. But that's just, I'm keeping it real though. Like I'm saying, like it's gonna take a lot for us to be in a position, and I will say this: there have been situations though in the United States, and I know I'm kind of being scatterbrained. There have been situations in which black women have been nationalistic in the United States. We can't deny it. Like in the biggest bulk of the Black Panther Party, that was women. Women was all up in the civil rights movement. They was getting their asses knocked in too. They was at lunch counters doing all kind of shit, putting their bodies on the line. So it's not as if it's not possible. It's just that, right now, I just don't see a lot of cohesiveness. I see a lot of, like neoliberalism in our community at the current moment. That's all I'm saying. You see, you catch my drift, man?
So I would say that the opening presumption that we are more hostile towards each other than other ethnic groups of men are internally, I would say that's false. Now we can discuss the source of any perceived hostility that we have as men within our own ethnic group, and we can compare that to how that may be different or the same as men within their ethnic groups. But by and large, black males don't have a more hostile view of each other than men do within their own ethnic group. I would say, but if you want to then say that the elimination, and it's funny because when you first began the talk tonight, you were talking about how the requirement for solidarity is not necessary when it comes to efforts of this scale. But yet that's exactly what
when did I say that? I said that solidarity is not necessary in order to engage in a wartime effort?
Maybe I'm misquoting you. But because maybe you were talking about the people that you were criticizing, not specific people, but just voices who've been speaking on these issues.
Yeah. So look, what I don't want, my man got to go. He got to go pray. Okay. So I can't hold him for too long. You know what I'm saying? He said this would be short. Okay. So I get what you're saying. I understand your concerns. The only thing I'm saying is, black women are not the only people off code as it pertains to black unity. That's just my viewpoint on it. Okay, it's not like black men are like all together like black men united, wearing fucking black berets and shit, got guns and muskets ready to put in work.
Right, but that wasn't the point of contention. That wasn't what I came on to say at all. What I was simply saying is that the notion that men need women in order to secure the frontier is historically not true. Men are going to disproportionately be at the forefront wherever danger is anticipated or unanticipated. So even when women help in any capacity, they are going to be in roles that are going to be more defined by pleasure and comfort and survivability not danger and unanticipated peril. That's the lone point that I was coming on to say, because the notion, but because
I get it, I understand. Okay, so basically you're saying men do the fighting, women stay at the home base and play more of a support role. But like at the end of the day, this is why Sandog is here, because he has been in the military as an officer.
That's not even remotely true.
Okay.
It's not even remotely true, especially now that we live in terms of asymmetrical warfare, right? Not even true. It's not even close to true. So so even for me, I'm a cavalry officer, just like I told Gigi, right? A Kiowa Warrior helicopter is in the air troops of the cavalry. I was on the ground troop. I'm a ground scout platoon leader. And when I fought in Iraq, because a scout helicopter pilot flies low. You could shoot them down. They fly very low, right? And so we fought in hunter-killer teams. And guess what? My battle buddies from the air troops, right, are these little blonde, two of them, both blonde-haired girls, probably 5'3", 110 pounds, if that, right? And they were squeezing triggers with me. They were squeezing triggers with me when they were on that aircraft.
Well, excuse me, not to belabor the point, but you'll always have anecdotal instances of women in combat.
But that's what I'm trying to say. This is not, when you get to asymmetric warfare, this is not anecdotal. So now they're putting IEDs on the road, right? So let's go with this. Most women are in combat service or combat service support, right? They're not in combat arms, right? So now when you put those IEDs and those explosive devices on the road, right? So now if food is being delivered, if ammunition is being delivered, if mail is being delivered, that's female soldiers are in those units in abundance.
Right. Those are not taking on direct combat. But like those units are not meant to take on combat directly.
But again,
they're meant to take on combat indirectly.
Again,
if they happen to come under fire, but that's not their job. Is to go where the fire is.
Chris, man, we gotta drop you because he's got to get through this presentation. Gotcha. So
yeah,
and I let you know beforehand exactly why that was the case. So, but as he explains his lecture, as he goes on with the lecture, we'll keep some of the comments you've made in mind. All right?
No problem.
So thank you, bro. Appreciate you, man.
Yep.
All right. So look. Big Kev, you got to make a quick statement or a comment. We're not going down a line of reasoning. So if you can make a quick statement or ask a question, we can get you in and out. No disrespect, because I got to get my man out of here.
Oh yeah, not a problem with that. Just in regards to what you talk about warfare. One point. Before I just hop off here, one point is if you read the book called Sun Tzu, The Art of War, what they talk about is that in regards to that direct combat role is if you do have to have a militaristic combat, the goal of war is to either win without fighting or win without making a long drawn out conflict. So basically, if you do have to use military force, you want it to be quick and simple and to the point. That's the reason why special forces exist, because if you make it long and drawn out, it's gonna drain the coffers of the state. And that's how countries like the Soviet Union went bankrupt, after the war in Afghanistan in the 80s, because they spent so much money on the war on top of building on top of stockpiling nuclear weapons. So just something, I just wanted to throw in.
That's a consequence of imperialism. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for the comment. I'm gonna let him expound on that.
Yeah. That's the consequence of imperialism. So again, remember when Russia was threatening what they were doing during the Obama administration, Obama said, and the Republicans were trying to say, well, Obama's weak and we need to do X, Y, and Z. And Barack Obama was like, Putin and I both know that his economy cannot handle an extended conflict, right? And so again, at the end of the day, so when people engage in imperialistic actions, right, they are making the assessment that, okay, I have a greater force, greater numbers, greater technology. It should take me X, Y, and Z, right? So when you had the war on terror, we were getting ready to go into Iraq. The general at the time, General Shashesky, told the Bush administration, if you want me to go into Iraq, I need 200,000 or more soldiers, and I need to be there for 20 years, right? And they laughed at him. Right, to the point where if you go back and watch the news, no active duty general took the job. They all retired, and they had to pull a dude out of retirement to be the commanding general of the army during the war on terror, because any general at that time knew that Iraq was going to be a debacle.
So look, I just want to summarize what's going on in this slide, okay?
Yeah, correct.
You talked about traditional forms of contact, and most people, when they think about war and wartime efforts, this is what they think about, okay? And they can't get themselves to see past traditional forms of contact, which are what the enemy you can see directly in front of your face. Like it's, the gray Confederates, the blue Union troops, or you get what I'm saying? Like clearly identified enemies, clearly identified proponents or your teammates or, members of your own army, right? There's direct fire, like bullets going back and forth. Then there's indirect fire like grenades, which, they basically damage an entire area as opposed to directly get pointed at individual persons, right? Or it might be used to, destroy property or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Contact with, obstacle or enemy of unknown origin. I don't know exactly what you mean by that.
Yeah. Again, that's what I'm saying. I summed it up.
Oh, I know what you mean by that. Hold on, let me say. This is traps, okay? Yes. Like altering the terrain to make it more difficult for you to be able to mobilize your own troops.
Correct.
Or something like that, right? Then you got aircraft. Then you got like just military equipment in general, planes, tanks, just vehicles in general, drones, whatever the case may be. Correct. You got electronic warfare, which is like utility warfare is what I would call it. You know what I'm saying? And then NBCs are what?
Nuclear, biological, and chemical.
Okay, yeah, so like, there's the allegation that, the Europeans put chicken pox in blankets and gave them to Native Americans when it was cold outside, shit like that. I mean, we already know that, like there was, biological warfare taking place in World War I and II. Even, in Vietnam, right? Agent Orange and shit like that. So we know about that. But when people think of war, this is what they traditionally think of. They think about direct fire or indirect fire, explosions, shit like that. But here are the non-traditional forms of contact that Sanddog needs to explain, which kind of puts forth the notion that it's not just a male activity. Go ahead, man.
Correct. But again, it goes back to the video that you had with Martin Luther King, right? When he was talking about the South and the North, right? And so again, Black America and maybe the world at the time was observing and responding to the overt racism, right? But at the end of the day, right, you never seen somebody come out and have a march because, I took out a housing loan and my housing loan was 10% higher than the other guys. Or when it was time for me to sell my house, the house is worth $750,000, but they lowballed me into $600,000, right? So again, these are the things that you don't see when we talk about principality. So when you talk about, non-traditional forms of contact, right, we're looking at, again, information, right? So you're talking about like, again, so there's facts, there's misinformation, there's assumptions. So information could be used, one, to help you gather those details and make decisions on the enemy or whatever, but it could also be used to misdirect you and also to confuse you, right? And so there's tons of things that can be done with information on the battlefield. So like when you had like communists, right, who would, reach out to African Americans and say, again, this isn't your fight, this is not your war in Vietnam. again, communism is the better system, so on and so forth, right? And then now you have cyber warfare, like to your point now, right? Okay, with cyber warfare, I could turn off your electricity, turn off your grid, shut down things in your societies that run by computers and all of this stuff, or the current technological war that's happening between the United States and China, right? Over the computer chips and everything else, right? Again, we could attack you through language, right? Again, shout out to, so for Black America, this is something that you're accustomed to, right? Where you're being attacked, where, okay, so instead of saying Black, we say things like urban, or how we talk about like the dog whistle in politics, right? Then there's the ideological battles, right? The whole red state versus blue state, left versus right, traditional versus non-traditional. So all of these things you could enter and you could attack within a society. So for example, let's go to like a combination between ideological, social, and political, right? So that would be like, okay, I'm a king in Congo and I'm fighting Gigi over who's going to control the Congo. So I decide that if I convert to Christianity and convert my kingdom to Christianity, I can get the Portuguese to come help me out and help me in my battle. So I can, quote and unquote, use this Christian faith in order to achieve my goals, whether I really believe in it or, whether I really believe in it or not, right? And so all the things that your society is predicated upon, your values, your legal system, your political system, all these things could be attacked, whether I want to introduce a new religion or if I'm going to take down your government and your police force and your army, just like we did in Iraq. So it's not just that, in war, I could physically kill you. I could change you. I could attack you through your economy, right? Again, shout out the economic sanctions, right? So again, you have people in Iran right now that are struggling behind the sanctions that America has imposed on them. As a matter of fact, even now in Afghanistan, right? So there's no U.S. embassy in Afghanistan. There's no formal relation between the U.S. government and the new administration ran by the Taliban. And those people are broke, and it is a tough winter, right? So it's a tough winter. So for that Taliban government, life is a lot harder for them with America being gone. So in their quote and unquote within their quote and unquote physical victory, if that's what they want to call it, right? Again, if you're in Afghanistan on the ground right now, it doesn't look like that at all.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately what he's saying is there's a lot that goes on in warfare that's not really actually direct, like physical contact at all. And you got to be mindful of and aware of what's actually taking place, not just in an overt way, but what's happening underneath the surface.
Yes.
Because if your only conception of war is smash, Hulk, smash, you already lost the war. Because it's a much more sophisticated practice than just Hulk smash. It is, one could argue, like one of the most sophisticated means by which to, gain and control power or to lose it. That human beings have been engaged. It's a fucking science. That's why they have like colleges and universities allocated towards military science. What do you think the cats in Annapolis are learning? Just how to shoot guns? Or are they learning, information technology? How to themselves issue cyber attacks? How to engage in propagandistic warfare, ideological warfare? To talk about like the whole, like even some of the buzzwords that we use ourselves are nothing more than like militaristic jargon and propaganda. Free world, capitalism, the forces of good, allies, axis of evil, referring to the enemy, terrorists, communists.
There you go.
These are terms that we utilize that are part of the wartime effort. But it's propaganda. Like, it's not just taking a damn gun and standing up and hurting and murdering people, man. And then like there are rules to engagement in war like that have been held amongst different nations, not because I guess people are like so-called moralistic, but there's a practical aspect to warfare. You can win a war but lose it, just like Sandor was talking about. You can win but not have really actually won in changing the ideology, the social and political practices or habits, which might be what you're looking to do anyway.
Correct.
Like if it's the case that you want to change the Middle Eastern world into a Western, like a Western facsimile, that shit, we're losing. Because them people ain't going for it.
Correct.
The Taliban, you might have put a dent in the Taliban, but do you really think that you've changed the social, political, and the legal outlook of most of the inhabitants of Afghanistan?
No.
No. And one could argue we went to Vietnam, we just blew the shit, we dropped a lot of munitions. You understand what I mean? We fucking laid down a lot of napalm, but did we actually do what we intended to do? Then one could argue to a certain extent, like it's an ebb and flow to politics and warfare. Like sometimes it looks like, you're on top and you win, and all it just takes is like one thing to go wrong, and then the transfer or the balance of power tips. I mean, all you got to do is study history. You know what I mean? But war is not just Hulk smash. It's not like that. No. I mean, even like, say for example, football, right? You know how much strategic shit is going on in a football game?
Facts.
I mean, you got people cheating, scouting, like before the game even happens. Like New England is notorious for the shit. They would go out and fucking scout and get spy and shit and find out what the other team's playbook is. Have motherfuckers watching the other team practice and shit. Fucking around with the equipment, deflating the balls and shit like that. Like, I mean, it's a sophisticated kind of, protracted kind of engagement when you're playing football, man. And it's not something that just happens on Sunday. Them people are preparing for the team that they're playing on Sunday the entire week. They're looking at tape. They're trying to figure out, like, offensive schemes. It's not some of the things that are happening that they're using to prepare for their battle. They're doing more preparation than they're actually battling on the field. They spend more time practicing than they do actually playing the game. The game only lasts for 60 minutes, right?
Yes, correct.
How long do they prepare every week to actually play for that 60 minutes? Way more than 60 minutes, I can guarantee you that.
The whole week.
So, I mean, all we're trying to do is to say this is more complicated than what people make it out to be, okay? Go ahead, man. Let me get you out of here, bro.
Yeah. So now let's get into it, right? Supply chain and deployment. Remember, we're slaves, right? We don't have access to factories and industry. Remember, you got people. So what? After slavery, you get what's called the Reconstruction Amendments, right? 13th in slavery. 14 allegedly makes you a citizen and everybody's equal. And 15 allows you to vote, right? And so now you got another 100 years of people trying to roll that back. As a matter of fact, I was just reading where in the state of Kansas, Black people were trying to build a town there and an economy, and the white people built a railroad. A railroad is supposed to go straight. The railroad looped around the town like in a damn half circle to go around that town, so those people wouldn't have access to the railroad to trade and grow their town, right? And so I will tell you guys this, right? When you look at the military, man, for those of us in combat arms, like even for Sandor, for me, any battlefield commander worth his salt is a historian, a cultural anthropologist, an economist, right? You know what I'm saying? I just didn't jump in my tank and start shooting. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a very quick story. When I went to war in my M3A3 Bradley, my main gun didn't work. My 25 millimeter gun didn't work. I can't remember if my gun didn't work or if I took it from one of my soldiers where his didn't work, right? I think I took it from one of my soldiers. So when I went into war, I'm on a Bradley, which is a small tank, and all I had was my damn machine gun and the tow missiles. I didn't have a main gun to shoot with, right? And so I went in with just my radio, and I'll hold on that, and I'll tell you the reasons for that, but that'll be something that I'll bring up later, right? You know what I'm saying? But when you look at the supply chain and this, we don't have factories, we don't have a distribution network. So you please tell me how we're going to engage in this process, which is reception, staging, onward movement, and integration, which we call the RSO and I process, right? So before you deploy, right, you have what's called a air part of de-embarkation. And this is where the people move. The seaport of debarkation is your equipment. So for those of us who had tanks and helicopters and all of that stuff, I'll never forget the day. We had to load that on trains, on the railhead. And that day was so cold because the chains, all of that is cold, man. It went straight through my bone, right? And so you are, so all of the stuff went to the railhead and then to the Port of Beaumont out of Texas, right? So at the end of the day, I mean, shout out to Marcus Garvey, right? A tank is 75 tons combat loaded, right? So in my divisional cavalry unit, there's 27 of them, right? Hundreds of them for probably thousands of them for 4th Infantry Division, or hundreds of them, right? So there's 27 tanks, 75 tons each, right? M3A3 Bradley combat loaded, if I can remember correctly, 36 tons each, plus the Humvees, plus the helicopters and everything else. So you tell me what rail lines and what a ro-ro vessel is. A roll-on, roll-off ship. So roll-on, roll-off is the kind of shipping boat or vessel that you put cars, tanks, construction vehicles on. Basically, you could drive it on and off the boat, right? And then you have container ships, which most people normally see, right? You have container ships, you have fuel barges, and all the other different ships that are out there. So shout out to the war on drugs and what Ice Cube said. What network like that do Black people own to do anything, to wage war or bring drugs into the country?
Man, the only thing Negroes had was the Underground Railroad, dog. That was about sophisticated the damn network that Negroes had, bro.
You know what I'm saying? So now, so now again, so now all of this gets shipped over. Remember, we talked about alliances, right? So now all of this stuff gets shipped over, right, to what will eventually become a tactical assembly area, right? And so at that time, it was with Kuwait. Remember before I talked about alliances, right, and support. So for us, right, who's gonna let us send? Who's gonna let you send your Sandog M3A3 whatever tank, right, on a boat or whatever, so you could go to the Netherlands and handle business, right? We don't have those connections. So basically, this is how, to make a long story short, this is how people and equipment get from one side of the world to the next, right? And so, again, this is a massive strategic logistics process, and it involves everything from procurement of these services to maintenance to storage, because military maintenance doesn't work like civilian maintenance does in terms of, military logistics doesn't work the way civilian logistics work. So we can't afford just-in-time logistics, right? So we need massive warehouses. We need massive warehouses of any and everything that will hold a 90 to 120 day supply. right? So we can't wait for just-in-time logistics. Can you go to the next one?
Yes,
Right?
sir.
Okay, so a tactical assembly area on the battlefield is where final preparations are made before you cross the line of departure, right? So once you cross that line of departure, you're in the heat, right? So the tactical, remember when you were a kid and you played tag, and if you were holding on to the bench, you was on base and nobody could touch you, so to speak. So
Right,
in a
right.
sense, this is what the tactical assembly area is. And so within the tactical assembly area, you start to engage in what's called the priorities of work, right? And so now what you're looking at here is you're looking at a tank platoon that's sitting in an assembly area, right? And so the reconnaissance patrol is out, right? You know, the spacing between the tanks are there. Everybody has their assigned sectors of fire, right? You've established your observation posts where your scouts are out there, you know, listening or seeing what's happening, you know, on the ground, kind of away from the hustle and bustle of what's happening there. Can you go to the next slide? So when you get into this tactical assembly area, it's balls to the walls, baby. And so again, look at the list of things that you have to do, right? So you have to establish security, at least 25%, right? You have to position listening and observation posts. Like I told you, you know, again, for lack of a better term, I called them scouts, right? Because again, tanks at times, right, could be very loud, especially if you're near to them, right? And so again, putting the guys out kind of like in a wooded area, you know, where, you know, not too far, but far enough where they could observe and hear what's happening, you know, in the environment, right? You're establishing communications with higher and lower echelons, right? So for me, as a scout platoon leader, it was important that I was able to talk to my troop commander, the tank platoon, the helicopters and the mortars with me, and then also the troops that would be adjacent to me on the screen line or in the field battle. So now you're going through your radio checks and all of this stuff and everything else, and you're working that out, right? You're gonna emplace crew serve weapons, right? So crew serve weapons for the most part are your machine guns, right? You're gonna complete range cards and sketches. And so again, you're going through all of this, and this is the time that it needs to happen when you're in the tactical assembly area, making your preparations to go fight, right? So can you go to the next slide?
This requires a great deal of centralized hierarchy for one,
Yeah.
centralized authority and discipline, clear like objectives and clear procedures. You know what I'm saying?
It took about 225 years to get that way.
Exactly.
Hey, yeah.
Oh, my man.
Yeah, he's welcome anytime, man. You know, we want you to actually be a part of this whole,
Yeah.
you know, with Nameless and with Sandal come on, we want you really actually to be here. But
Oh yeah, because a lot of what he's talking about is the troops, and it's funny when he talked about the scouts because part of the time at QRF, you're going to send a much more quiet unit, like he said about tanks being. But also, people don't realize this concept of tanks being vulnerable in urban environments, and that's why you see, you know, things like you don't see tanks in cities too much.
Correct.
Because of the vulnerabilities to RPGs that they're coming around the corner. You got a grenade that's designed in a cone shape that's like got like molten mercury or whatever material they have that can burn right through it at such a high speed and heat. So that's why you have people out there like a scout or a QRF to go out and clear a lot of that stuff for the tanks to come through. And for a lot of people, it's a concept that they're forward with. Like, it's a tank. What can hurt a tank?
oh man, plenty can hurt a tank, bro. Plenty can hurt a tank.
Yeah, man.
That's why even helicopters are known as tank killers. As soon as you see a helicopter,
yeah, man. That's what I was scared of the most, man, was dismounted troops and helicopters. You know what I'm saying? You know, and shout out to this super chat, man. You know what I'm saying? You know, yep, man. I like I said, appreciate it, bro. But when you're looking at people that are in the so for example, this is an infantry squad right here, right? And so this will be Charles's people here, right? And so you would have in an infantry platoon there's 30. In a scout platoon I had more. Tank platoon is only 16, but you would have a squad leader, which is your E5, you know, NCO, right? And then you would have your fire team, and you have each fire team has a team leader, right? Then there's the rifleman, the automatic rifleman, and the grenadier with the grenade launcher. And a lot of times the automatic rifleman has an assistant rifleman that carries extra ammunition and extra barrels, right? Because again, for these machine guns, if you shoot them up, the barrels get pretty hot and use hell. You could even melt a barrel, right? And then to the right is what some of the is what these you know what I'm saying, is what the equipment that they have will look like. So we have something called MTOE, which is a mission of table organization and equipment. And so again, that kind of lets you know what a soldier has, what they carry, you know, life support, the fight, and everything else. So the squad leader, that's what I had. I had an M4A1 carbine and I had a pistol. I was a surgeon with that damn carbine, right? And so you would have that. And then for the grenadier, if you look at the grenadier, like I said, on the bottom, you see which is another small gun, and that's the grenade launcher, right? And then you go all the way down to the automatic rifleman, right? And that will be a M249 machine gun. I think now they probably have something completely different. So you would have a M249 machine gun, or you would probably a 50 cal, maybe, depending on how the unit is outfitted. And so when you're talking about the people that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the assembly area, these are the people that are doing it. Can you go to the next slide?
Yes, sir.
Right? So now this is one of the things that you do in the assembly area, right? You know, again, you're looking out past the line of departure and out into the wilderness, and you're setting up what's called your sectors of fire. So squad leaders and team leaders will draw this for their squads and their people, and then me and my platoon sergeant will take all of this and make one for the platoon. And then we would take what we have for the platoon and take it to our executive officer or troop commander, and he will make one for the entire troop, right? And then obviously, you know, it kind of makes it up the chain. So you notice how you have the tank sitting there. And again, so you have a sector of fire. You have where you have probably with another tank where the fires cross. So when you're looking at the two arrows, the two black arrows on the far right and the far left, that is the limit of his sectors of fire, right? So if he's to shoot past the front fender or the front road wheel of his track to the right, if he's to shoot past that, then he's shooting into somebody else's sector of fire, right? And then again, also the same thing also to the left, right? And so you're looking at the primary sector of fire, which is for the most part directly and straight ahead, and a secondary sector of fire. So at least when we were on the Abrams and the A3 Bradley, we had the benefit for the fact of the most part of we had one person who was able to watch an area because we had 4 different sets of eyes. So I was lucky enough to be on what's called the M1 A2 SEP Abrams tank and the A3 Bradley. So the gunner has his own sight. I had my own sight. It was called a Commander's Independent Thermal Viewer. So basically, it looks like the beginning of what will be R2-D2. So, like, for example, like, you know how you see R2-D2 in Star Wars and, you know, the robot sits in the back? So my little R2-D2 was up on the front. So it's an independent sight that I have. My gunner had his own sight. And then, you know, the driver and the loader are the driver's looking by eye and the loader had binoculars, right? And so we will all work together to kind of cover our sector of fire. So again, if there was enemy coming, if we're going to be attacked, right? If we're going to be attacked and everything else. And then this is probably where somebody like Charles will come in with the QRF. So God forbid if something were, if something were to happen, where we're at, then there will be a quick force that you could dispatch. There's a quick force that you could dispatch, while everybody else can move to an objective rally point or something else before they can marshal and go out. So again, as
to
you can
give
see,
just to give
yeah,
a little bit of notice for people.
yeah,
A lot of stuff I had to do was, convoy security, search and rescue, direct action, which means you actually have to shoot the enemy in combat. And one of the missions we had was, we had to rescue a tank crew in Fallujah. And the only way you could tow a tank is with another fucking tank.
correct.
So you
Yeah,
can only go as fast. Go ahead.
no, I'm listening. Yes, correct. Yeah,
And that's the time when you're hooking it up and you're trying to go because you can only go as fast as your slowest vehicle.
well,
People are going to take pop shots or sniper shots at you. So a lot of times when you're looking at this graphic here is that you have what they call intersecting fire, which means you see where those lines start to cross.
yeah,
Yeah,
That
yeah.
means you have a greater range of killing the enemy if necessary, because he's going, by the time he's trying to look, he's having two he doesn't know where, one, he's probably not going to know where you're coming from, and then two, every time he looks, he's got a damn bullet flying towards him. And the reason why it's at a certain sector like that, because one, you could cover more ground when you have two or three people. Your vision is going to be widened instead of everybody just focusing on one, which makes you a bigger target. And then two, you have a wide enough field for that saw gunner, because the saw is a squad automatic weapon, which they're replacing with, I believe, something from, I think Remington is developing another light machine gun. And the difference between light machine gun and a heavy machine gun, when I was the 50 cal gunner, that's considered a heavy machine gun. It's something that's going to be mounted or crew served. The light one is something that you could carry. And yes, so I think Remington is bringing back another one where it's actually has a specially designed suppressor that can last about what, anywhere from 20,000 to 100,000 rounds being put through it.
wow,
Beautiful thing. So, and when that saw gunner, because he's gonna have that field of view, he's gonna just sweep, just like, if you're looking at windshield wiper, same arcing view. Especially when he's shooting and he's putting down suppressive fire, so everybody can retreat or engage. But go ahead, Sandog.
yeah. You miss it, Charles? What you want me to send you some? You want me to send you some range cards so you could? So yeah, yes, sir. I'll send you my map and protractor, the old compass.
Oh yeah. Oh god. Don't remind me of that shit.
But yeah, can you go to the next one, Gigi?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so again, so now when you're in there, so this is also what's happening at the same time. It's what we call the 8 troop leading procedures, right? So again, so at that time, me as the dirty officer, right? I'm receiving the mission. I'm getting the plan from the commander, me and my platoon sergeant. And then, so now for an operations order, sometimes you don't get the full order, right? So sometimes you just get a warning order, right? Which is kind of like what's going to come up next, right? And so, okay, are we doing a movement to contact? We're doing the defense or whatever the case might be. So you're just kind of, the warning order is you're just getting part of the plan, right? And so based on that, you make a tentative plan and then you start all the necessary movement and everything that you're going to need to do to make that plan work, right? And so again, so you would have reconnoiter. So again, you would do your reconnaissance or whatever information that's available. You would take that to kind of confirm or deny what your execution is going to be, and then you'll take that, you'll complete the plan, and then as more information comes, the commander will issue the complete operations order, and from step 8, what you go back and then you supervise. So instead of supervise, we used to have a thing. We said step 8 would be to rehearse, right? And so, because remember, supervise meaning that you're constantly refining the plan as you go, right? So again, so I may have gotten some information earlier where, you know, for my platoon, this is what I decided what the course of action was going to be. But again, as we're up, as we're rolling, and as more information is coming down, and me and the platoon sergeant are working together, and the squad leaders are working together to refine the plan, right? We might come up with something similar and just more refined, or something completely different as the information continues to come down.
And it's funny
Right?
because a lot of people don't understand. You're going to hear something called a static and a fluid, because, you know, a static plan is that, or a static environment is that nothing changed on that environment, meaning that, let's say he's in the command of his tanks and they're engaging in battle. Nothing changed. All of a
Yeah.
sudden now, helicopter comes out. Now it became fluid. So it became ever changing. That's when you have to make, you know, as in football, it's the equivalent of making audibles. So
Correct.
that's what he's referring to when you're making changes, when it becomes from static to fluid. It's ever evolving, ever changing. You can continue.
Correct. Yeah. So this one, this will be the fundamentals of reconnaissance, right? And so the fundamentals of reconnaissance is to retain freedom of maneuver. So I was a heavy scout. Remember, we had a 25. Remember I told you I couldn't shoot my main gun, right? Which for me was a good thing, because again, as a commander or a leader on the battlefield, right? I want to position myself where I could best observe and manage the battle, right? If I'm sitting there going bang, bang, bang with everybody else, that I'm not necessarily leading or managing. I'm in the fight. Right. So for me, my main gun not working in a sense was a blessing, because it allowed me to function doctrinally. You know, it allowed me to function doctrinally the way that I ought to function or should function. And you know, again, luckily for me, I'm alive to talk to you, and we found good success in it, right? Report information rapidly and accurately. I think that's self-explanatory. So as a scout, as I see things, right, for reconnaissance, as I see things happening, okay, I see 1 BMP, I see 3 BMPs, I see 5 BMPs, right? And so now people are taking that information, like I told you guys before, and the plan is, you know, the plan or the course of action at that given time is being updated, right? And then again, accurately would be, you know, again, even to the point where you read a map, right? And we'll talk about that also later, right? You know, in terms of map reading and everything else. But that's again, that's also very important, because if they call artillery, you don't want it to fall on top of you. You don't want it to be danger close. Or if you have forces supporting you, you don't want to send them in the wrong direction, right? So that's why it's important to report rapidly and accurately, right? Ensure continuous reconnaissance. Reconnaissance doesn't stop. Develop the situation rapidly. Again, right? Again, like I said, things are moving, right? Things are moving, and when it's talking about again, you know, to develop the situation. So developing the situation for us also, again, it's not just shooting, right? It's also the reporting aspect of it, right? So these are all the things that are going into it. So there's the shooting part, there's the reporting. And so developing the situation ultimately is you're painting the picture for your commander, right? You're painting the picture for your commander so that he's seeing what you're seeing, right? Recon assets, scouts do not stay in reserve. There's no such thing, right? You have 2 eyeballs, right? Do you take one of your eyeballs and put them in your pocket? No, both of your eyes are open, so all eyes are always forward, right? The more eyes, the better, right? So nobody takes one of their eyeballs out and says, "Hey, I'm going to put this in my back pocket and save it for the next Avengers film." No, you use your eyes to see, you know, every day that you can, right? orient on the recon objective. So remember what I told you guys earlier. As a scout, it's a little bit different. So when I was a scout, a lot of what I did was a movement to contact, which is an offensive operation where as a heavy scout, you're fighting for information. So what would happen is that you would have something called a CCIR, which is a commander's critical information requirement, right? And within that will be essential elements of friendly information and essential elements of enemy information. And he would give me something as a scout called the NAI, which is a known area of interest, right? Or sorry, named area of interest. And so if what I found, if what I found at the named area of interest confirmed the commander's critical information requirement, that just became a mission for a larger force behind me, right? So this is why, again, that's why it's always important that reconnaissance is continuous, which is, again, to gain and maintain enemy contact, right? So again, chances are if you see them, they see you. But for the most part, again, to gain enemy contact, to never lose sight of them, right? And again, all of these things work together. And so when you get the reconnaissance and when you get the security, all of these things are constants on the battlefield, right? So you and again, so it's the somewhat similar ideas and the fundamentals of security. And so these things are constant. They don't stop, right? What's the next one? Okay, so this is the last slide here, and I'm going to save the rest for when me and Nameless come together, because Nameless wants to take the things that I did in the military and also match it up with his sword forms, right? But this is the beginning of what you would call operational terms and graphics, right? So again, a map is a topographical representation of the Earth as seen from above. And so with the blue forces and the rectangles are friendly, the diamond are hostile. Now, again, when I was growing up, or when Charles and I was coming up in the military, the war on terror was for a loop. When Charles and I were in the military, we were getting ready to fight Russia. Everything was about, although the Cold War was over, everything was about Russia up until 9/11. Right?
Everything about the big red army, baby.
Yeah, it was all about Russia. And so in the next one, I'll come back with the operational terms and graphics, and you guys can see here. So for Sandog would be the one that you see on the bottom, the blue one you see on the bottom to the left, the mechanized recon. So that would be for me. I think Charles would just be recon. From what I know what he did. Charles would just be recon. So that's what it looks like for friendly, and that's what it looks like for enemy. So the enemy is drawn with the diamond and they're put in red, and then there's another color. There's another color for neutral forces. I'll bring that up. And then there's another color and shape for unknown forces as well. But what would happen is that the emblems in the middle will all remain the same. So if you look at, for example, air defense, how it has the arch in the middle, and hostile has the arch in the middle, right? And then for air defense or the others, 3 dots above it is a platoon. Like, 2 dots is like a company. So I'll come back and I'll explain. Like I said, I'll come back with these symbols and then the sizes, and I'll tell you the difference. Between, let's say, a platoon and a battalion and a division. But again, so these are some of the operational terms and graphics that we'll use. So I'm going to cut it off at this point. And the whole idea is to share in this space, right? That at the state or the federal level, right, the use of force is complicated. It is complicated at the state, federal, and city level. These things are complicated. So for all the people who are out there, and especially for like many of our sisters, right, who kind of think that, okay, you're a man, he's a man, why don't you just punch him in the face and put an end to it? But sad and most unfortunately, you don't have your own state, you don't have your own, you don't have your own industrial base, You don't have your own political base. You don't have your own technological base, monetary banking systems. You don't have all of the stuff that it takes to develop and to create a machine like this.
And
Yeah,
this is
now,
the
go
this is
ahead,
the
go ahead.
called an institution. It's
Correct.
something it can see. An institution is built to run day and night, 24/7.
Yes.
Like the mechanized military. That's what we have, a mechanized monster. Think about it. Can the military fight day and night?
Yes, it can.
Can it bombard you day and night?
Yes, it can.
Can they sit there, blue water navy, and bombard or embargo your ships?
Yes, they can with ease.
Because a lot of y'all a lot of people don't realize this. When you have an embargo against a country, it doesn't mean just their economic. It means we actually send our cruisers and destroyers out there to blockade anybody from coming in with trade. That's how powerful war really is.
It's a siege. It's a fucking siege, is what it is.
Exactly.
I
And
mean,
that's
the only thing I wanted to do was to, along with Sandog, and you're damn sure welcome to continue to come anytime we're doing this. This is a series we're doing to try to get people to understand. I don't care if you're a nationalist. I don't care if, you're like one of those people who believes the black community should stick together. I don't care if you're a man or a woman, if you're straight, if you're gay. I don't care who you are. If you're interested in seeing black people uprise, like with traditional, conventional warfare, I'm saying to you, you don't even have the ethos to begin to engage in a protracted battle against these people. You're talking about the most sophisticated military in the world.
In human history.
in human history.
But
You
you
gotta-
niggas is conquered though. Like, first of all, black people are embedded within this military.
Yeah.
That's one of the things you ought to understand. So, I mean, black people are part of this machine. Okay? Now, my viewpoint on it is, even when you had the civil rights movement, you had a situation though, but the social conditions were such that there was a forced type of black unity. Okay? To a certain extent, because segregation was overt. There were separate places in town where black people could live and where white people could live. There were separate facilities that black people could use, white people could use. Okay? This ain't Harlem in the 20s, man. We don't live in that time anymore.
What
Okay?
people don't understand is one concept, GG. If you don't command the land, the sea, and the air, you must infiltrate the system from within and make it your own. Look how many people made this their own. You look at the Asian community, Hispanics, the Jewish, the Italians, the Irish. Black people still do not think they're a part of this system. And this is the reason why the system is against you, because you don't want to be in it and use it from within. You're trying to fight a war with a giant. Literally.
One of the things, so one of the things, like what people need to do is study the Germanic tribes and the way that they eventually sacked Rome. They were part of the fucking infrastructure of the Roman military. All you have to do is go look at this shit, man. There's fiction out there right now that demonstrates the Germanic participation in the Roman Empire and their militaristic campaigns. Like how the Romans would conquer a certain area of Germania, take the boys back, like the leader of the tribe's sons and shit, will go off to Rome and train in the Roman military and come back and either serve Rome with fidelity or either they would revert back to, their early programming, their early indoctrination, which is to have some sort of fidelity to their own tribe. And but Rome fell from bureaucratic and structural problems more so than it did related to, its lack of military prowess. I mean, it was a cultural decay that eventually led to the downfall of Rome. But,
Sounds familiar.
But at the end of the day, man, if you want to approximate, if you want to get close to resistance, it can't just be, being rash and saying, let's get out there and just do it. It's like trying to get out on the NFL gridiron with the fucking New England Patriots and saying, we got 11 guys, fuck it, let's just do it. Like they got the best players in the fucking world on their squad, bro. They've been doing this shit since they was fucking kids. But you want to get a group of motherfuckers who, for all intents and purposes, let's just keep it a buck, man. A group of malcontents who are fucking spoiled rotten to the fucking core. They eat McDonald's, they watch TV, ain't a virtuous bone in their goddamn bodies, and they're demanding that they want change. They want something different. What did fucking JFK say?
Don't ask what your country.
No, what he said was, don't ask what the fucking community, like whatever it is you're looking to
Don't
achieve.
ask what your country could do for you. Ask what you could do for your country.
Bam. Don't ask. What the fuck are you doing to bring about the state of affairs that you desire to see? And it takes more than just a bunch of guys playing with guns and shit. It requires support. Like, one of the reason I like to use sports as an analogy is because it is a microcosmic, I call it sublimation, a microcosmic sublimation of warfare. Is what sport is. I mean, whether it's basketball, baseball, or football in America, okay? Or even like soccer or anything else. It's the sublimation of competition in a zero-sum game in order to demonstrate like virtuosity or dominance, or but without killing and murdering. It's the same function as warfare, but it's sublimated, meaning that it's boiled down to where human beings it's ceremonial.
It's a watered down version of warfare like chess.
So look, you have to plan, plot, strategize, and kids who become the dopest motherfuckers at a sport have parents who are instilling habits of discipline into those kids from the fucking early years. Now, I'm not saying there aren't any freaks of nature who just pick up the sport like, I never played basketball before. I'm just 8 feet tall. That shit happens. I'm not saying it doesn't. But more often than not, you got to put a lot of effort and energy into practice, development for a long period of time. I'm talking about from like pee-wee age on up to professional age. And then there's only a short window there. But the only thing I'm saying is we want virtue out of people that we're not putting any effort and energy into making virtuous. How do you plan to get a group of people to, in a ragtag, dirty dozen fashion, like all of a sudden, like the Bad News Bears just start fucking winning?
You don't.
It's absolutely fucking absurd for women to ask for it or nationalists to ask for it. The only thing you can begin to do is to say, okay, if I want an ideal to permeate the black community, what are some of the ways that I can go about, making certain that idea becomes as prevalent as I desire for it to be? How do I do that? We don't have the advantage. This is a pluralistic society where anybody can do whatever the fuck they want. So you can't force it. You can't use Christianity or Islam in order to proselytize to a group of people or to determine whether or not they're faithful or infidels. You can't do that. So what can you do? I'm just saying from a logistical, tactical point of view, what can you do? And so what the black community likes to do is to use shame. Oh, you guys ought to be ashamed. You ain't took over the whitey yet. Like, huh? Are you fucking serious? Like, is this the sum total of your thoughts? And it's not just men who have to be preoccupied with trying to win. Mm-hmm. If that's what you want to do. Because, again, as I said before, the children are educated primarily by their mothers in their formative years. Like, you can't, in some instances, you can't even outdo your fucking primordial, early biological, social education.
Yeah, because remember, right, at the end of the day, right, look, I'm not saying it's there, but like, for example, we don't have a Tiger Mom culture, ADOS, right? So again, you don't a lot of kids from Asia, like they'll have a mother with a knife in their back, like, yo, you're going to be at MIT by the time you're 12, right? So right now there's some 6-year-old kid who has no idea what Cocomelon is, but he knows what damn sine, cosine, and tangent is.
Man, one of the things, like, we're not a militaristic people, bro. Like, I mean, not to say that there ain't guys in the military, but like, as it pertains to like our culture, we might have been like in Africa, okay? But like the average black American is not militaristic by any stretch of the fucking imagination.
No, you were made here. You were manufactured in the States, right? So you're not, so again, it's very difficult. Again, like shout out to Jamaica, right? So, or the Maroons, right? So a lot of those slaves that they took over there, man, those guys were they were a part of the Ashanti or the Akan, right? So a lot of those guys were military and they were veterans. They knew how to use their weapons, British weapons and everything else. So for whatever reason, the British decided, at least for those groups of slaves, that they were going to bring in veterans, which is why the Maroons mopped the floor with a lot of them. So it's, for a lot of us, man, you got to remember, we were domesticated, chattel slavery, right? You're domesticated. So you go from a wolf to a poodle in somebody's purse.
But here's the funny thing though, not meaning to cut you off, but like, motherfuckers expect for black people to be like just born shooting out of the womb like Tuskens and shit from Star Wars, or like they just like Fremen from the movie Dune, like they just battle ready and shit.
Like, how many years you have to put into people, and how much money you have to put people into to make them battle ready, and remember.
But let me just say this, and this is why I want to respond to Troy West here, right? They don't have to be. They don't have to be trained like that because the system works for them and in their behalf. The system is designed to basically get people like us to fight for their interests. And at least they have some concept like of nationalism, basically American pride. Like they have rituals that we even participate in that circumscribes their own identity and their patriotism. What do we have? I believe the Negro National Anthem. Niggas don't even know what the Negro National Anthem is.
You got to think about it, GG. We damn near bred the warrior spirit out of most of the boys in our community.
Well, it was beaten out of us first.
Yeah.
But Negroes are all warriors amongst themselves, though. Motherfucker will shoot and kill a nigga real quick. Mm-hmm. real fast. You know, especially these kids that grow up in these urban environments, because the value of their own lives is not put in a position of prominence and importance. That and bruh, we can do this shit all night, man. Like, we at the 2:19 mark. I don't want to keep Admiral Smoke longer than I got to keep him. You know what I'm saying? Because I know you know, he got to bounce and break and shake. But the only thing I wanted to do with this show was to just demonstrate, look, war, man, is more than just live action, you know, like, it's deeper than that, bro. In the same way that the sport is deeper than just going out, like you could play amateur ball, or no, you could play pickup basketball, or you can go to the NBA and watch the motherfuckers who've been doing this shit since they were 6, 7 years old, training with professionals do this shit. When you're talking about the United States military, you're talking about the most streamlined, well-funded, technologically advanced military in the fucking world. So a group of niggas with who can barely fucking read. Which is like, it's not funny, I'm laughing to keep from crying. Who can barely read at an 8th grade level are supposed to mount an offensive against what? How?
But they do it in the movies.
Man, I'm just thinking, what black folks could be doing is developing a culture centered around virtue such that they could be able to, like, and that's why I'm reading this text, Dark Ghettos, where they could create a culture where they can close ranks and become advocates of justice for themselves. And not only that, create cultural conditions that will be conducive to learning how to compete with these people and play them at their own game, to beat them at their own game. Now, whatever black people put their energy and efforts into, we do it damn well. I mean, like, if a nigga want to be cool, that's going to be the coolest nigga you ever seen. You talk about being able to dribble a ball, throw a ball, kick a ball, hit a ball, whatever. You talk about balls, niggas got mastery of throwing, catching, and, you know, hitting them. When it comes to running, jumping, and all that shit, we got it. Unfortunately, when it comes to reading, writing, and performing complex functions and equations and shit, we don't put our effort into it.
Yeah.
It's like Kwanzaa Kunjufu said a long time. We don't even build a culture that values that. If you want like dynamic people, you got to invest in them. You got to create them. They don't come from out of the loins of their mothers just knowing dope shit. You got to create institutions to where you indoctrinate them with dope shit and instill values within them. Like, you send your fucking kids off to school, they ain't got. What's happening is we fucking, and then after we fuck, that's the family. No planning for the family, nothing. Just, okay, you know, like, okay, let's just smash. Oh, that pussy was good. Now you got a baby or whatever. Or that dick was good. Now it's time to, you know, think about how after the fact we're going to have a family life. And then wonder why the family life is not conducive to any, like, functioning and flourishing and the ability or the capacity to overcome the environment, because the way you went into it was not even with a plan. You just went into it based on hedonism and animalistic function.
Correct.
But then you say, okay, well, you want something you want something cultured to emanate from that. You just did the wild thing. Not with any forethought, nothing. It's just random hookups and shit. And then the kid's supposed to be like godly from those kind of unions. How? It goes for men and for women, but definitely for women, because women are the initial carekeepers of children. It requires men as well, though. I mean, like it takes two to tango. So it's a male and a female issue. But damn. Now you got women like, fuck it, I just want a baby. All I want one by myself. Like it's a fucking poodle or some shit. Like it's cute and shit. Like, it's cute to have a boy. That shit ain't cute. I got a baby bump. Look at my bump. Everybody is so happy for you. Why? Your fucking kid's a bastard. Anyway, man, I'm done soapboxing, bro. I'm done with the shit, bro. And not to say I'm a bastard. But my life probably would have been a lot easier if I wasn't a bastard and I had a situation in which there was a group, a whole civilization dedicated towards making sure that the best out of the best could be derived from my existence. And contributed not just to my own sense of self-worth or my own idea about, how dope I am and how better I am than the nigga next to me, but like a development of community who's like, okay, look, like you see how the Jews do the shit, bro. Not all of them are like super tight, but like there's a group of them motherfuckers, man, they look out for each other, bro. It's a culture of excellence and indoctrination and enculturation that we don't have.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So like, and my whole thing is that, like I said, this is fixing this circumstance is a lot more complicated. It requires more heavy lifting, right, than many of us think, right, or even than some of the, like I said, some of the women think. Again, because like I said, people, you'll have people that'll look at us as men and say, okay, well, why don't you just punch them in the face and bring it all to an end, right? Because probably for many people, that's exactly what they think, or exactly how this works. But again, you're talking about a series of complex institutions that make up this body. This thing is a well-oiled machine, and it doesn't stop and it doesn't sleep, right? And so I think, I think that's a reality that we have to accept. And for us, at this point in the game, or for human beings, just in general, right? What you would call revolution is not out in the streets with your fist in the air, but at the end of the day, being a good family man or being a good family woman, and ultimately being a good neighbor, right? So it kind of goes back to, like I said again, it's something influenced by the state, but sad and most unfortunately, a lot of the American public no longer know how to be good citizens.
Let me tell you something, man. Look, I'm just gonna keep it a buck though. Like I'm critical of black culture, but I mean, as a philosopher, I also have to be critical of white culture as well. You know what I'm saying? And not just in the sense of politics, but just in the sense of just their social conventions and their social life in general. And I can tell you, man, like the average white guy, man, is just as fucked up as the average black guy. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a fact, bro.
Yeah, man.
It's like I'm not here to just ripping the black folks because I just don't like Negroes. It's just like all I'm trying to do is to say, look, you really, like they say, you got to be like, if you're black, you got to be twice as good and work twice as hard. You really actually do. And you gotta have a double consciousness, but we have a double consciousness that's all fucking convoluted and confused. We have a schizophrenic ego. You need to have an ego like, okay, you ever seen the Game of Thrones where there was this one motherfucker, there was like a mask god or some kind, like a motherfucker who created man. He can appear to be anybody.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
That's how you gotta be. You gotta be able to switch characters, change the game, code switch. You gotta be a double agent, bro. But not us. Not us, bro. Nope. So I say, look, the average American is basically like, he lives a life that's been manufactured for him. When you talk about politics, to be quite honest, amongst white folks, it's the same for Negroes, but the consequences are more drastic for us. Okay? So when you start talking about like what way of life we should live, and you start to, debate like the merits of like different shit that people agree or disagree about, like trans life, like the whole trans issue or whatever. These questions are being answered, but they're not being answered in public debate. They're answered in smoky back rooms by oligarchs and plutocrats who are really actually guiding policy, and lobbyists who are courting legislators. And because the life of the hedonist who is prone to conspicuous consumption is the one that oligarchs and plutocrats favor, they like that. That's the kind of life that's openly promoted and endorsed. And the average person, white, black, red, brown, they don't really have a choice in the matter. And they're really actually manipulated into accepting a way of life constructed for them. And they don't think that there's any way out of this. This is just natural. This is a normal way of being. To be a hedonist and to look for conspicuous consumption. Like, that's the average goal of the average American. But think about this. You want to get married so you can have a life of hedonism and conspicuous consumption? That's it? That's all? That's your shit's gonna fail. As soon as the hedonism is gone, or you don't have the capacity to live a continuous, have a succession of experiences of being able to buy a bunch of bullshit, what, then the marriage is null and void? That's some bullshit. So, all I can say is, there are philosophers who talk about all of this, who are white, and they critique Western culture just as, much as I can critique it from a black or, a racial perspective. But the reality is, hey, America is like the Hunger Games. Like, for real, like they do fiction off of this shit. How things are constructed in America. And now the social media shit, likes, is like currency for motherfuckers. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because if you got enough likes, it turns into currency. God damn, bro. I'm done tonight, man. You get enough motherfuckers to like your bullshit, you can monetize it. So, it is what it is, man. I'm done, man, for the night, bro. If you want to go to war, it's going to require, the education of children, not taking full-grown man-child actors and shit who are fully grown, who have not been indoctrinated, not been modified, and proselytized to. Like, there's no way you can get some Negro who's been watching fucking cable television playing video games, and jacking off to fucking Pornhub to all of a sudden become a goddamn black Nubian warrior. It ain't happening, bro. I'm just kidding. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
How you gonna tell? I mean, I'm not saying that that's all black people are, but I'm just saying, like, come on, bro. It's not gonna happen, bro.
No, we're Americans, right? And so, whenever a ritual appears that appears to be hypergestic, eventually, we what am I trying to say? I just missed up my words. Okay, I lost my train of thought, but basically, to make a long story short, guys, man, it ain't as simple as you're gonna punch down this glass wall and fix these problems. The system and the world that we live in is far more complicated than you think, right? You have friends in places you don't think, and you have enemies in places, that you don't think. And so, for anybody who thinks that, that this is the way, it's not the way. And then also too, it's time that we became intelligent and learning when it came to institutions, because institutions have evolved in how they deal with people, but we haven't evolved in terms of how we deal with people. So this is just one example of a state agency and again and how it operates. So I thought that this would be a little bit more fun than talking about how corporations do it or how embassies or the State Department does it. I think the Army stuff, since there's some bullets flying, this story has a degree of action to it. But I'm just telling you guys, man, be aware. Like the Bible says, right? Our fight is not with flesh and blood, but with spiritual wickedness in high places. And then so hopefully, God willing, on the next one, Nameless will be here, and we're gonna get more into the operational terms of graphics, and we're gonna get into the actual battle itself. And so, God willing, Nameless will also be with us for commentary on the actual battle and movements and how things work in battle. So hopefully, in this presentation, we could use this video or whatever in the future to dispel the myth that we're one masters of the universe, punch away, again for freedom. Because at the end of the day, man, we're Americans, right? We think American, we are American, the way we function is American. And so, the dissatisfaction that we have with society, we have to learn about society and the history of our society in order to address the problems or the areas in which we find dissatisfaction to make it better. So, like I said, that's my closing. You know what I'm saying? I'm out. I'm on my way to Castle Grayskull.
By the power.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, shout out to y'all, man. I don't know if Faulkner's still there. You got any closing things you want to say, bro?
Hey, drink cognac every day. Woo!
Well, anyway, man, with that one, man, we about to end it up, man. Peace out, man. I'll holler at y'all on the next one.
Okay.